When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in 74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. He didn't mention a timeline, but he said that it was going to be speeding up faster than anybody could possibly imagine, that the effort to put weapons in space was not only based on a lie, but would accelerate past the point of people even understanding it until it was already up there and too late. In 1977, I was at a meeting in Fairchild Industries in a conference room called the War Room. This is 1977, and they were talking about creating a war in the Gulf region when there was $25 billion in the space-based weapons program that yet had not been identified. It wasn't called the Strategic Defense Initiative, at least, until 1983. This weapons system then had obviously been going on for some time that I didn't know anything about. So I stood up in this meeting in 1977 and it said, I'd like to know why we're talking about space-based weapons against these enemies. I'd like to know more about this. Would somebody tell me what this is about? Nobody answered. They went on with this meeting as though I hadn't said anything.
Dr. Carol Rosin is one of over 450 witnesses who have come forward with inside information that they were told to shut up about. That first clip was from the Disclosure Project Witness Testimony series on Google Video. Listen to what she says, because I believe it could be very important. Here's what she said at the Press Club in Washington in 2001.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, after being a 6th grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. And I said, you know, teachers don't stop until June. He said, no, you have to understand, this is February. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies. This is a system, he told me, that would never protect anyone. Even back then, he talked about suitcase bombs. He talked about chemical, viral, bacterial, biological warfare, that these space-based weapons would never protect us against. And then he told me that, in fact, if you travel around the world, which I did after he died in 1977, I met with people in over 100 countries who were friends. They didn't want to build space-based weapons. I became a space and missile defense consultant. And I worked with people around the world. I became an advisor to the People's Republic of China. They don't want to build a space-based weapon system. And he told me back then that they didn't. He said, go to Russia. They're considered to be the enemy. I got on a plane by myself. When I got to Russia, I had a list of people that I had read out of the newspaper. Chernenko was in office then. He was the only one I didn't get a chance to meet. They introduced me to everyone when I got there. And when I got back, I said, oh my Lord, this man is telling the truth. There is no threat. And I've been waiting until this day for 27 years, and I'm expecting the spin to happen, because he also explained to me that as a military strategist, as a person who worked on the MX missile, which I did later, he said, you will find that there is going to be a spin to find some enemy against whom we have to build space-based weapons. And now we should expect the spin, because he said part of the formula for the intelligence community is if they might have a weapon, then we have to consider that they do have these weapons. So now they do have these weapons, so now we have to build these weapon systems. And that's the formula, except that it's all based on a lie. And we have witnesses here today that have shown you that these extraterrestrial beings, that these craft that have come here are now not UFOs, they're identified flying objects, and we know that they have beings in them. And we have witnesses here who have told you that they can shut down our missile silos, they can stop a rocket going into space that's a test. We have witnesses here who have worked in the classified departments, who have the courage to come forward here to support what Wernher von Braun told me back in 1974 to 77. And I will testify before the Congress that when I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space, which I shut down a few years ago because I didn't believe we had a chance with this huge, integrated around the world, complex weapon system, that we had any chance at all of transforming that war industry into a space industry that could provide benefits, like Dr. Greer has said, of global warming. We can end that situation of that problem. We can end the energy crisis. We can build now non-polluting technologies. Wernher von Braun used to tell me that we could have cars back then that drove around off the ground. He described this to me on beams so that we have no pollution on this planet. And we can solve the problems of the people that are urgent and potential, and the other animals and the other cultures on Earth and in space. And we can end the arms race without dislocating the industry jobs, without disrupting the economy, by transforming, Wernher von Braun told me, the war industry into a global cooperative space industry that will provide, he said, finally, more jobs and profits on this planet than during any hot or cold wartime, more products and services that can be applied directly to solving the problems of this planet. And we can have a whole planet now that lives in peace on Earth, with all the cultures on Earth, and with all the extraterrestrial cultures in space. And these are words that Wernher von Braun told me in 1974, and I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Note the part about first it will be the Russians, then it will be the terrorists, then it will be, the final card will be the faked alien invasion. This is what she said back in 2001, before 9/11 happened. And those of you who have been keeping up with 9/11 and the truth movement information that has come out about the attacks know that the so-called war on terror is a complete lie. and we were never after Osama bin Laden, and that's all being exposed now, just like the fake WMDs were exposed in Iraq. Most people are too propagandized that they are unwilling to believe this and won't even look into the evidence. The rest don't care because they don't think it concerns them or because they feel powerless to do anything about it, and I tend to agree with them. The criminals who caused 9/11, who had the connections to all the inside security at the World Trade Centers and the cooperation of the intelligence community in the White House, will never be prosecuted for their crimes. They got away with it. And even if, by some miracle, we did open up a congressional investigation, prosecute those responsible for 9/11 and put them all in prison, it would be like putting a Band-Aid on a cancer. 9/11 was only a symptom, and we need to treat the disease. Because once the war on terror fails to give the government a reason to funnel billions of taxpayer dollars to corporate interests, they will simply find another excuse. Here we have insiders warning us that aliens will be used as the next excuse. This is why I have been warning people about the 2012 stuff, and to be very skeptical about it if and when first contact happens. Don't believe it right away. I know you want to. The people in charge are using all this money to build an Orwellian-style police state. This is the type of future that they feel most comfortable with, because they have always been in power, and now that they are beginning to lose their power, they are very, very scared. They don't want the kind of future that you and I want. They want everything to stay the same or go back to the way it was, and that's not going to happen. The world is changing very quickly, and it's all up to us what kind of world it will change into. Here's a few interesting organizations that are doing various things to accelerate the future and progress. Nassim Haramein also has a YouTube channel now, so you might want to check that out. But the real change and the real future progress is going to come from you. So please do your part by helping to spread this information. Because the first battlefield in this war exists in the hearts and the minds of the people.
Now, the U.S. military has launched a new type of spacecraft into orbit from Cape Canaveral. The X-37B is an unmanned platform that could be used as a weapon and a means to spy on potential threats. Former director of America's Advanced Space Programs, Robert Bauman, says the craft could help the U.S. use space for their own military gains.
I was in charge of all of the advanced space programs, including Star Wars, under Presidents Ford and Carter, when their existence was secret. Space has been militarized for a very long time, long before I was in charge of Star Wars programs. This is the real question here. Is this X-37B the beginning of weaponizing space? But it eventually could be. There's no doubt that when the Air Force spends this much money on a program, they see some potential military usefulness in it. One possible mission would be the destruction of opposing military satellites, gaining absolute military control of space. And the second would be to destroy targets on the surface of the Earth from space without warning. These two missions were the missions assigned to the Department of Defense in 1982 by Ronald Reagan in his secret defense guidance document.
A secret space plane, years in the making, now set to launch. The U.S. Air Force plans to launch the X-37B orbital test vehicle tomorrow to perform a series of unspecified tests. So is this a sign that the United States is going above and beyond in space exploration, or the beginning of the militarization of space? Here to weigh in is space entrepreneur Jeff Manver. Jeff, we're talking about this X-37B. Now, from what I understand, this is a robotic spacecraft, sort of resembles a shuttle, and it can circle the globe for a very long periods of time. Talk to me first about the vehicle itself and what we know about it.
Well, we know very little about it, which has a lot of people upset. But it's about 29 feet long, about 9 feet wide. It's really a mini shuttle. It's going to launch on an unmanned launch vehicle called the Atlas V, and it's really based on 2 decades of shuttle and space plane work, and that's about all we know about it.
So a lot of questions here, a lot of criticisms as well. Critics are saying this is a way for the United States to simply expand its military into outer space and For example, to have a way to spy on, I don't know, China. Give me your reaction to this.
Well, the first is the philosophy of the whole thing. Here we are in the Obama administration and the era of transparency, and the United States must be driving Iran, must be driving China, must be driving Russia crazy, because we've been going around the world saying space programs have to be transparent. And now here we are launching a craft. We're not saying what the mission is, how long it's going to stay. Now, in reality, it's really probably just a technology demonstration. But the need for them to stay silent on it does not suggest, it really is a tin ear in politics. They're not really understanding what they should be doing, which is to push for greater transparency.
It's pretty interesting, too. I know that the development of this vehicle has been in the works for a very long time. It's also almost been canned a few times. And again, it's been saved by the Department of Defense. I'm wondering if you could maybe speculate on why you think that they saved it.
I mean, the space guy in me loves this thing. I mean, this could be an inexpensive way to get to space routinely. We wanted in the commercial space business to send goods and do things in space, manufacture pharmaceutical drugs, and return them. This could solve that. However, the Pentagon may also want it to have eyes and ears in space quickly. People are speculating it could have a space bomb. And just the fact that people can speculate about this really has me angry. Because again, I mean, we're lecturing the Chinese now, you must have greater transparency in your space program. And yet here we are, not even saying when it's coming down. We don't know if there'll be another flight. This might be the only flight for it. So there's too many unanswered questions. We really didn't need to have this cloak of secrecy. But I'm glad it's there, but I'm sorry it's secret.
I mean, I'm wondering, is this something that you think other countries will see as us taking the lead in space exploration and kind of coming at the forefront of new development, or do you think other countries will see this as a threat?
Well, other countries are making note of the fact that it's not coming from NASA. It is coming from the Air Force. Why the need to come from the Air Force? I know the Air Force stepped in more than likely to save it in the budgetary sense, since NASA didn't have the financial means. But that gets lost the further you get from Washington. And as far as other nations are concerned, why is the Air Force putting this up? Why is the Air Force being quiet as to its capabilities, the objectives? It's just wrong to do when we're trying to open and put some rays of sunshine and light on other nations' space programs. It's just wrong for us to be the secretive at this time.
Just very briefly, Jeff, what do we know? What do we know about this?
We know that it's the Air Force has saved this spacecraft. It's probably doing technology demonstration. It's probably crammed with sensors. We're trying to see how quickly we can land and take off again. Probably the Air Force wants to use it as eyes and ears. I don't think anybody wants to do a space bomb or anything like that. Probably they want the ability to suddenly take off from an airport somewhere in the continental U.S. if we're looking for something, we're looking for a runaway nuclear bomb. So it's probably that, or it may never fly again. And they just ran out of money. We just don't know.
We just don't know. All right, space entrepreneur Jeff Manver, thanks so much for weighing in on the X-37B set to launch.
In diesem Video geht es um die ISS, die internationale Raumstation. Anfang April kam es zu einem merkwürdigen Funkkontakt, der aufgezeichnet wurde und hier auf YouTube anzuhören ist. Auf einigen US-Boards war dieses Funkgespräch ebenfalls heiß diskutiert worden, wegen des Inhalts. Und so richtete I Want to Believe, ein Kanalbetreiber auf YouTube, eine Anfrage an sehr viele Leute, unter anderem auch an mich. Es gab sogar mehrere Anfragen danach. Henning Kemner, ein US-Kanalbetreiber vom Kanal 2010 The Countdown, hatte sich dann dieses Themas angenommen. In diesem Funkgespräch ging es also darum, dass die Besatzung der ISS irgendetwas gesucht hatte, was monatelang verschwunden war, und sie haben es gefunden. Es ist immer eine Schwierigkeit, wenn irgendwelche Abkürzungen benutzt werden, beziehungsweise fremdsprachliche Begriffe, und erst recht bei Kürzeln, also nur ein paar Buchstaben, die aufeinander folgen. So wie auch hier. Da kann es immer sein, dass etwas ganz anderes gemeint ist, was man dann zunächst mal findet, wenn man dann auf die Suche geht. Bei dem Kürzel, was in dem Gespräch verwendet wurde, sollte die Verwechslungsgefahr allerdings sehr gering sein. WAAM ist das Kürzel und das steht für Wide Area Anti-Armor Munitions. Es handelt sich um ein 1983 entwickeltes Waffensystem im Auftrag des Department of Defense. Dankenswerterweise sind diese ganzen Unterlagen im Internet zu finden, und wenn man hier mal nachliest, dann sieht man, dass diese Waffensysteme aus einer niedrigen Höhe gegen ein Gelände eingesetzt werden. Die Ziele, die bekämpft werden sollen durch dieses Waffensystem, sind Panzer und gepanzerte Fahrzeuge als auch Versorgungsfahrzeuge. Hier wird zum Beispiel diese Anti-Armor-Cluster-Munition genannt, und dabei handelt es sich um eine Art Streubomben, allerdings von größerem Kaliber, so dass eben Fahrzeuge zerstört werden. Diese können dann unterschiedlich ausgebracht werden, sei es durch Bomben, sei es durch Raketen, sei es durch Marschflugkörper. In diesem Gespräch zwischen der ISS und der Bodenstation wurde dann auch ein Kürzel benutzt, welches Henning Kemner, der Kanalbetreiber von 2010 The Countdown, das Kürzel interpretierte als Computer Targeting System. Und das gibt es tatsächlich. Also gibt es auch ein Zielsuchsystem auf der ISS. Im Laufe seiner weiteren Recherche gelangte Henning Kemner dann auch noch zu dieser MPC-Status-Page. Auf dieser Seite werden allgemeine Probleme im nahen Orbit oder im weiteren Umfeld der Erde behandelt. Besonders in diesem Abschnitt wird behandelt, dass es einige Kometen gibt, die periodisch immer wieder die Erde bedrohen. Auf dieser Internetseite sieht man dann auch eine Unterteilung in 4 Punkte, oder besser gesagt 5 Punkte, die Kometen beinhaltet und gewisse größere Objekte, die in einer nahen Distanz sich befinden. Aber was soll das sein? Die Frage stellt auch Henning Kemner in seinem Video. Als auch die Liste der als kritisch bezeichneten Objekte. Insgesamt werden 250 Objekte aufgeführt, die sich im erdnahen Orbit befinden oder diesen immer wieder kreuzen. Von diesen mehr als 250 Objekten werden 58 als sehr kritisch angesehen. Und da diese Liste eben auch Gegenstand des Gespräches war zwischen der ISS und der Bodenstation, muss natürlich gefragt werden, haben diese Waffen irgendwas mit einer Kometen- oder Asteroidenabwehr zu tun? Denn es kann ja wohl nicht sein, dass diese Waffen von der ISS aus abgefeuert werden, um am Boden wirksam zu werden. Sie würden verglühen, genauso wie irgendwelche Schrottteile, die mit wesentlich höherer Geschwindigkeit im erdnahen Orbit umherkreisen und hin und wieder zur Erde herunterfallen. Waffen, die aus dem Weltall oder im erdnahen Orbit auf die Erde abgefeuert werden sollten, müssten irgendwelche Skalarwaffen sein oder Laserwaffen oder Raketen mit Schutzschilden, aber das wäre doch sehr aufwendig. Henning Kemner von dem Kanal 2010 The Countdown ist dann in seiner weiteren Recherche auf den Satelliten WISE aufmerksam geworden, der angeblich abgeschaltet sein soll. Sagt er zumindest. Ich weiß das nicht. Wenn man nun die Bilder vergleicht von 2011, also vom 11.01. zum Beispiel, vom Satelliten WISE aufgenommen, dann sehen die doch sehr anders aus als die Bilder, die darauf folgten. Wie dieses hier zum Beispiel vom 2.04.2011, als auch das vom 31.03.2011. Und Henning Kemner sieht darin, also es ist eine Interpretationsmöglichkeit, er sieht darin, dass man vielleicht irgendetwas sucht, weil das ganz anders aussieht wie das Bild vom Januar 2011. Die Munition, die allerdings in dem Gespräch zwischen der ISS und der Bodenstation angesprochen wurde, ist aber mit Sicherheit ungeeignet, Asteroiden, Meteoriten oder Kometen abzuschießen, in der Hoffnung, sie als Gefahrenquelle zu eliminieren, sei es für die internationale Raumstation selber oder gar für die Erde. Eine Anwendung von der ISS selbst auf die Oberfläche der Erde hin ist auszuschließen. Bleibt also die Frage, was auf der ISS ein Waffensystem wie zum Beispiel diese Wide Area Armor Munitions sollen in Verbindung mit diesem Targeting Computer System, mit diesem Zielsuchsystem. Aus meiner Sicht machen diese Waffensysteme nur Sinn, um gegen Satelliten eingesetzt zu werden, in Verbindung mit diesem Zielsuchsystem. Ansonsten ergibt sich kein weiterer Sinn für solche Waffen auf der internationalen Raumstation. Bis hierhin erstmal. Ich wünsche euch alles Gute und gehabt euch wohl.